How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Catfish on Ice with Chad Minton and Max Greenberg. How you doing, Max?
Not too bad. How are you, Chad?
Doing well, man. We've had some time to process and digest what happened with the Predators in the first wave of free agency. So tonight is going to be all about looking ahead to 2024-25. Is the hype for real? Is it justified? Is the Predators about to be going up against some of the biggest pressure they've ever faced as a franchise in preseason, if you will, like preseason expectations? Yeah. That's what we're going to get into tonight because we've had time. You know, when we did that last episode, it was fresh. It was
so fresh.
Now we've really had time to think about it. A lot of the updated odds for the Stanley Cup are out there now. We're in the lull of the offseason, kind of, where
feels like it.
We're going to start looking towards predictions, preseason predictions. So that's what we're thinking about here. We're gonna really look into all of that. We're gonna go back into the prospect pool here because the Preds prospect pool has really went through some changes as well. So Barry Trotz has talked about that next wave. He has not abandoned the youth movement, even though it looks like he has. He still very much believes that there's a next wave of talent. Yeah, Max is laughing there. In fact, I remember, Max, last episode I told you to wait, not answer that question about the youth movement being dead. We're going to have a chance to talk about that tonight in that segment, all right? Also, we're going to talk about – we're always about trades here. We love talking trades. Yep. I don't think the Preds are necessarily going to do any trades anytime soon, but we're still going to talk about some possible trade candidates for 2024-25. And we've got our friend Boyd from Penalty Box Radio, feature writer. Got to follow him on all the social media accounts if you're not already. I already know that a lot of our community already follows him and already knows a lot about him. Boyd's going to be joining us live here in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So look out for that for this great episode. Until then, let's tell you who we're sponsored by. It is, of course, DraftKings with promo code THPN, and also brought to you by Manscaped. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to announce that Smooth Sack Summer is officially upon us. When you're playing in the summer sun, make sure you're groomed from pubes to bum. Thanks to our friends at Manscaped, you can make this season your smoothest yet. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the ultimate bundle to keep your boys downstairs cool while looking hot. Join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Get 20% off plus free shipping when you go to manscaped.com and use code THPN. Got to be careful, Max, when you're going down there and you're grooming. You got to be careful. I know firsthand that you need to be using the very best products out there on the market, and that is Manscaped. Trust Manscaped for your sensitive areas. Inside the package, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, great name. 5th generation, new foil blade to go smooth. The Crop Soother aftershave lotion for those summer barbecues. You got to get ready for the summer barbecues. 2 free gifts also come: the Manscaped Boxers and the Shed Travel Bag. These are all great names, by the way.
No, right?
Waterproof trimmers, reduce the foot odor. Oh, man, those long 10-hour days for me, I need some foot odor control, let me tell you. And reduce those nicks, gentlemen. Reduce the nicks. All right, so get 20% off plus free shipping with the code THPN at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code THPN at manscaped.com. It's Smooth Sack Summer, boys. Get on board or get left behind. And we are going to be getting into our other sponsor, of course, which is DraftKings with our promo code THPN. We're actually going to be talking about DraftKings has just put out a lot of their 2024-25 preseason odds, and it's really, we're going to put it on the screen later in this episode here. Where do the Preds place after free agency, the Steven Stamkos effect, the Jonathan Marchessault effect, and, of course, all the other things they've done. And really, Max, I want to open up this episode with this very, very real question that we're both going to answer here to open up episode 238 of Catfish on Ice. And that is, there was one other time where I can really recall, and I know you haven't been a fan of this team since the early days, right? But really the only time I can remember the Preds having this much hype going into a preseason and going into a season where the whole NHL, I'm not talking about local media having hype on them. I'm talking about national media actually starting to have hype. I'm thinking the Predators are going to be some sexy, trendy picks to win the Stanley Cup in 2024-25. So what I'm saying is this team facing the most pressure they've ever faced going into a season nationally in franchise history? I think that's a very fair question to ask yourself.
It's got to be up there. The only times I could think, at least recently, that's been like this were the years after, we were in the Stanley Cup final. Maybe not directly the year after, because that was kind of a 8-seed run. People are kind of thinking, okay, can they do it again? We don't really know. But
that's what I was thinking.
The Preds came right back that next season, won the President's Trophy, had all the pressure in the world going into those playoffs. Obviously, didn't get it done. But the next season, expectations were still there. And they were like, look, this team still has it. And at the time, Eeli Tolvanen was supposed to be one of the guys on the up and up for this team. Obviously, didn't work out the way we had hoped. But, ever since that 2018-19 season, I don't think there's been that much pressure. Maybe the year after after we'd signed Matt Duchene, but I don't know.
That's what I was thinking. So that's what I was thinking. I think the only other comparison for this franchise to have this kind of level of expectations league-wide. Again, now let me say league-wide. There's been plenty of seasons going back to the Paul Kariya days where the local media would have been very high on the Predators. But I'm talking about nationally speaking. Even after that Stanley Cup season, a lot of the national media looked at it as kind of a magical thing. They didn't look at it as the Predators are the next great team. And, of course, they won this. They won the President's Trophy the following year. So I would argue that the season after the President's Trophy season was maybe the only other time I can remember the pressure being very high because they won the President's Trophy and then they lost in 7 games, that brutal 7-game series loss to the Winnipeg Jets where Pekka Rinne just couldn't be the hero we needed him to be in that Game 7 against the Winnipeg Jets. But everyone was still thinking, okay, next year it's our window. Our window might shut after next season. I think that's the only other time I can think about where this Preds team in franchise history had this level of a bright microscope league wide on them. And so the pressure is on, Max. And it should and it absolutely should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially after you don't make the moves that Barry Trotz just made to do nothing. No, there's going to be a lot of expectations, and with as they say, there's a lot of hype. There's also a lot of responsibility. Can this team back it up? And we see how it's way easier said than done. And so, this team absolutely has, a lot to, they have, again, there's a lot of hype, but there's also a lot to prove. So
our resident Preds historian, Redemption, otherwise known as Johnny, jumps in and says the 2006-07 season, that team was up there with the firepower they had. So that's a good point there. Let's pull up that team real quick since Johnny brings them up.
I was not watching then, actually.
But a lot of people weren't. So let's just share that team. That 2006-07 team went on to put up 110 points in the standings. Wow. Somehow finished second in the Central Division. That division must have been stacked that year, of course. But they went 51-23-8. And that was, of course, the year where they had Jason Arnott. Then they had Paul Kariya. They had J.P. Dumont, David Legwand, Steve Sullivan, Martin Erat, Kimmo Timonen, Scott Hartnell.
Wow.
An early Shea Weber. Alexander Radulov. Ryan Suter, Dan Hamhuis. Scott Nickel, who's now an assistant. But, that team was stacked when you look back on it now.
That back then, absolutely.
I'm really glad that you brought that up there, Johnny. That was awesome that you brought that team up. I forgot how stacked that team was when you really look back on it now. So now what we're about to do to open up in the opening face-off here of episode 238 of Catfish and Ice with Chad and Max Greenberg. We're waiting for our buddy Boyd Farrish of Penalty Box Radio to hop in live. He's going to jump in on this entire episode if he'd like to. He is welcome to do this entire episode with us. But let's get it started before he joins us here. We're about to stack up the Predators after that first wave of free agency up against every single other team in the Central Division. And before we do that, we are going to look at some odds on where the Predators stand in the DraftKings odds for winning the Central Division. So we're going to do that really quick. So right now, the Preds are third in the division in terms of best odds to win the Central Division. We're going to put it up right now on the screen for our YouTube viewers. First of all, Max, what do you think about that? You think third is fair behind the Dallas Stars and the Colorado Avalanche in terms of best odds to win the Central Division next year?
I actually think that's pretty reasonable. I think, I've been kind of going to give away a little bit. I was looking at the teams. I didn't just look into Central. I looked all throughout the Western Conference, seeing how this Preds team really matches up with the rest of the teams. I think any team, especially the teams that, are behind us in the odds, I absolutely think that we can be better than them. I even think that the Preds have a good chance to be better than Colorado. I think Colorado's a team that's kind of trending downward. Their depth is really not that strong. Outside of like Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen nowadays, there's not like really a ton else they have up there. It seems like, at least not a ton of like fire. Of course, they still have Kel McCarr and some other good players. I'm talking like offensively though. Their top six is, at least the middle six part of it is kind of lacking, which you do need. Dallas though, that's going to be a tough mountain to climb though.
We're about to look into each team. We're going to stack up the Preds against each one of these teams, including the Utah Hockey Club.
Surprised though. I'm surprised that it's 380 to 260. That surprises me.
That's a big jump.
That is big. That's a little.
I'm in no way trying to give betting advice right now to anybody, but
no, don't take it from me.
I can promise you there are a lot of people out there who are going to look at the Predators at plus 380 and think that is a really trendy pick that's worth taking a stab.
I just said I'm not a bettor, but again, that's one where if I'm thinking, I'm
very generous.
Okay, that could be you could actually win some money there.
I think that's some generous odds for sure right now, and of course that could change as the season gets closer. But that's where we stand right now. That is the latest update from our sponsor, DraftKings, when it comes to Central Division winner. We're going to share some other 2024-25 odds they have. But first, really want to get into a little bit what Max was talking about before we deep dive into each one of these teams. When I think about each one of these teams, you're going to see a trend here. The Central Division, for the most part, didn't make any waves except for the Predators when it comes to free agency. None of these teams, like when you look at Colorado and Dallas in particular, they didn't sign one major player in free agency. And really, they didn't have to. They didn't have the room to. Their core is already so great. They really didn't have to go out and go heavy shopping, kind of like the Predators did. So I understand that aspect of it. But the Avalanche in particular, we're going to put it on the screen a little bit later. They didn't do anything in free agency. They basically just stayed par for the course. Stay the course, move forward.
My question is, and it's crazy I don't know this rule completely because the NHL has made things really weird with how you can circumvent LTIR rules and all that. But how much are those Landeskog and Nichushkin contracts affecting
It really
them?
hurt them.
Those
it
are
really
anchors on them.
It very much
affected
affected
in
them.
the waist right there.
No, they couldn't do anything. They were pretty much hamstrung and couldn't do anything in free agency. And even with them not doing anything in free agency, they're still legitimately a top Stanley Cup pick for next season because they do have some of the world's best players already there. And it's not that they've gotten any worse than last season. It's just they didn't do anything to make themselves any better. There's still questions around Alexander Georgiev, of course, in net. Can he hold up to it in a Stanley Cup pursuit? But we will see. But we're about to deep dive into each team. We got Boyd joining us any second now. We'll wait and see when he jumps in.
He just messaged both of us. He said a little before 9 Eastern. So it's just a few more minutes.
Yeah. All right. So we will watch. Until then, we are going to start this opening segment with going into each team and how they So Max, what order do you want to go in? I say we go from bottom to top. So how about we start with the Chicago Blackhawks? How about we do that?
It's always nice to let us know that they're at the bottom.
Now, the Chicago Blackhawks actually were one of the teams in the Central Division who were very busy, arguably busier than the Predators.
No, they definitely got better. They definitely got better for sure.
I mean, you only have anywhere to go but up when you're talking about the Blackhawks, who literally just had one of their worst seasons in several decades. in terms of their franchise history. We're going to put it on the screen here. But Max, just some additions before we put it on the screen here. Some key additions by the Blackhawks this offseason. Tyler Bertuzzi, Pat Maroon, Alec Martinez, Teuvo Teravainen, and they got a new goalie, the backup goalie for the Winnipeg Jets, who was a very quality backup for them, Brossois. Yep. Yes, and they really didn't lose any players that were too major of value. So,
I mean, who do they have in the first place besides Connor Bedard?
That's so wrong. But yeah, so Max, let's first talk about the Blackhawks here. There's only one direction to go, but up. They really can't get any worse. They had 52 points this past season. I mean, it was pretty bad. So obviously, we think they're going to be a little bit better, but are they still going to be the laughing stock of the Central Division? Do you think they're going to are they destined for last place?
I mean, I still think in all likelihood they're probably going to get last place. It's probably not going to be quite the same, but I think they're definitely going to be better. Of course, like I said, I like the Tyler Bertuzzi signing. I like them getting Teravainen, and I think that definitely adds more talent. Obviously, it adds a little more talent around Bedard. Definitely helps their kind of middle six. Also, one thing that I think a lot of people are not talking about, and again, he's old now, but they didn't have Taylor Hall for like all of last year. And if he's going to be healthy, that could be another thing that could help them out. Again, they're definitely going to be better. Again, I still don't think this is a playoff team by any means yet, but in all likelihood, they'll probably still be in last place. So, but again, they're going to be better. But like you said, nowhere to go for this team but up.
So you're seeing it there on the screen. Their 2023-24 record was 23-53-6 for 52 points. That was that franchise's lowest point total going back to I had to look it up. I did. I looked it up. 1957 was the last time they had lower amount of points in a season. And that was back when they only played 70 games in a season. So that's not even really fair. So like in the modern day NHL 82-game season, that is the worst season the Chicago Blackhawks as a storied franchise has ever had in their franchise history.
Man, I'd love if they can continue more of that. I mean, that'd be great for us.
I do think they definitely got better. I mean, they added some playmakers. They've still got some great young talent. Of course, we know Connor Bedard is only going to get better. They've got some pieces around him. Bedard was the best player on that team, other than maybe Nick Foligno was good at times. But like, they had nothing, and they still don't have goaltending. They still don't have depth, really. No. But I do think they're going to make a dramatic improvement from 52 points.
I think so. I would say so.
Maybe 70 to 80 points. I'll stick them somewhere around there. I think they're actually going to be a much more formidable opponent. Whereas it doesn't happen very often in the NHL, but when you played the Blackhawks, you kind of felt like it was the same terminology they use in college football, almost a cupcake opponent.
Yeah, no, pretty much. Except you're in the pros, so.
Yeah. So that is what we think about the Chicago Blackhawks. So, of course, when we stack it up again, when it comes to the Predators, obviously it should be another great season head-to-head series for the Predators to add more wins head-to-head in that series against the Chicago Blackhawks. We would think so, right?
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, yeah. You would think. You hope.
Even though, I mean, obviously any team can beat anybody in the NHL. Right. So, and by no means are we predicting another season sweep of the Blackhawks, but just head-to-head on paper. And that's really what this conversation is to open up 238, is this is all on paper. These guys got to perform on the ice, and we don't know what's going to happen with that until they obviously get on the ice. But just on paper, looking at the Predators, that's the whole point of this exercise, is we are stacking them up against every team in the Central Division. Chicago, a pretty easy one in terms of head-to-head with the Predators. But me and Max both agree that Chicago will be much better. Let's go to the Utah Hockey Club. First of all, it's really, really confusing to even figure out who Utah is, because they took all the players from the Arizona Coyotes, but they are technically a new franchise. So wrap your head around that. Yeah,
it's interesting. Although they did make some pretty big, they made at least a trade or two they made 2 trades on their back end. So their defense, I would say, has gotten a decent upgrade this offseason. So it's a little unrecognizable there. But again, it is still essentially the same team as the Arizona Coyotes from last year.
Yeah, so they still got Clayton Keller, who I'm a big proponent of.
Great player.
But we're going to put it on the screen here so everyone can see what they've done. So last season, as the Arizona Coyotes, they were 36-41-5 for 77 points. Additions, both were through trades. Mikhail Sergachev from the Tampa Bay Lightning, that trade, that's a big one for them.
That's huge. That's really big.
Really big. They got Ian Cole, another depth defenseman. And really, when you look at their subtractions from last season, they really didn't lose anyone of note. So
John Marino is also a pretty good ad for their defense as well.
So they've essentially got the same Coyotes team that they've got, only now they're Utah Hockey Club, and they're starting all new record books. That's the confusing part about all of this, is they are technically a new franchise. They're not an expansion franchise, but they are a new franchise because it changed ownership. So try to keep up with that because it gets a little confusing. But let's talk about the Preds against Utah. So we know, as the Coyotes, they were kind of the Preds' kryptonite last year. It was so annoying. Every time you thought, okay, this should be a win tonight. We're taking on the Coyotes. And they were just a thorn in the side of the Predators last year.
Yeah, no, it was an interesting one. And again, just looking from team side by side, of course, even the Preds are going to be better. Of course, and the Coyotes, not the Coyotes, Utah definitely has some talent. Again, like I said, Kleller, they added a lot on their defense, but I still don't think it's quite enough. And the Preds also got a lot better too. So still don't see the Preds, or still don't see the Utah really, being better than the Preds. And I would agree they're probably going to be in that 7th spot in the division.
Alex on YouTube jumps in and says, I think Utah will be better, but I'm still salty that the Coyotes management screwed over Arizona. Yeah, that is a really messy situation. They could never figure out the arena situation there in Arizona. Wow. And even Gary Bettman finally came out and admitted that it doesn't look good right now, and they've got a lot to figure out in Arizona. If they ever when the league expands again, maybe Arizona could bring back the Coyotes as an expansion team. How crazy would that be if that were to happen? Because Gary Bettman has always been very, very loyal to and stubborn about keeping the NHL in Arizona. But now you got Utah, which is a very untested market. We don't know what's going to happen. We do know that all the season tickets have been sold out last time I saw. And so there's plenty of buzz, but there's always going to be buzz about a new team in town. So you shouldn't be too surprised by that.
Well, speaking of Arizona, didn't they finally just say Alex Marullo cannot be part of it anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mercifully.
Yeah, it was just a mess. That owner really did screw things up, and those Arizona diehard Coyotes fans have every right to be really, really upset right now. But, there's still hope that maybe way down the road that Arizona Coyotes will come back as an expansion team. The record books will reset for that franchise, and we'll see what happens. But that's a very interesting. But when it comes to just the Utah Hockey Club in their first year, not as an expansion team, even though they're really going to feel like an expansion team, they are not. They didn't go through an expansion draft. They've still got all of the Coyotes players. Really hard for me to pinpoint really what to expect from Utah Hockey Club. They've got a ton of young talent. I could see them flirting with the playoff bubble for a certain portion of the season, especially considering the moves they've made this offseason. But in terms of being some NHL darling and being some great sports story, which it would be a great sports story to see, they're going to be playing at a glorified NBA arena where a good chunk of that arena will not even have good sight lines to watch hockey. So I don't even know what that home atmosphere is going to look like, but they've moved from playing at Mullet Arena, Arizona State University's college arena. Now they're playing in a basketball arena that the Utah Jazz play at. That's not built for hockey at all. So those players that have played for the Coyotes and now are part of the Utah Hockey Club, they've been through a lot, but they will be another feisty team. They'll be a team that has talent and will have plenty of upsets along the way this year. But they're still probably a team that finishes somewhere between 6th and last place in the division. I would say.
I would say so too. And I'm looking at their arena right now on the inside. It doesn't look horrible. It doesn't look great for them. So definitely still a step up from Bullet Arena. And I would say also, I don't think it's going to be quite like a Barclays Center situation like the Islanders had many years ago.
Yeah.
That was a true disaster.
And what do you, Max, what do you think about their logo? It seems like someone created that logo right off the fly. Like someone said, hey, you got 30 minutes to come up with a logo right now. And that person signed on to Microsoft Paint and made the Utah Hockey Club logo. I mean, that is the weakest logo I've ever seen in my life. I'm not in any way talented when it comes to graphic design, and I could have done a better job than that.
You know what I always call it? The Washington football team of the NHL.
Yeah, but they still had a better logo. This Utah Hockey Club logo, that's bad. It's really comes off like someone had 30 minutes to come up with that.
Yeah, who knows what's going to happen? I mean, yeah, it certainly you and I could have created it, that's for sure. But yeah, I don't know. But it's as far as the team goes, though, definitely agree. Probably between 6th and last place in the Central.
But logos do not win hockey games, so I think they'll be a feisty team for sure. Let's move up the division. Let's bring up the St. Louis Blues here, a team that's. They've already got their Stanley Cup. They got their Stanley Cup in 2019. So I'm sure that fan base still has a little bit of I think that recent Stanley Cup, it's like put yourself in their shoes as a Predators fan. Let's say the Predators broke their Stanley Cup curse in 2019. It would probably reduce the panic level for you a little bit if you were only 5 years removed. So that's kind of where I feel like Blues fans are right now. They had a pretty disappointing season. They hung around the playoff race as late as they could. They're such a middle tier team. They're just like, they're not horrible, but they're definitely not elite. They've got some great players, but they lack a lot of superstar power. They got Jordan Bennington, probably one of the most despised players in the entire league. Yeah. But they've got that Stanley Cup in 2019. So what reason is there to panic? I really don't even know what to think about the Blues going into next season.
Yeah, I think they're just kind of like you said, a very average team right now. And again, if you're Barry Trotz and the Preds, you're 100% expecting that you can easily take the Blues overall head-to-head, matchup-wise at least.
I think so too. So there's the Blues. There's what they did last season. 43, 33, and 6 for 92 points. Missed the playoffs, 5th in the Central. Their additions, not much. And they were both through trades. Radek Faksa from the Stars, and they got Matthew Joseph. Their subtractions, they lost Kevin Hayes. Whatever, doesn't really matter. For me, the Blues did nothing this offseason to get better or worse, which is kind of odd considering they were right there on the playoff bubble. So you would have thought they would have done a little bit more but they did re-sign Buchnevich, which is
a lot of money.
For a lot of money, but they did keep him.
Yeah.
So they did keep one of their own that's key. So I don't want to leave that out. Let's go ahead and get Boyd in. Boyd Farrish of our good buddy from Penalty Box Radio. We're gonna keep rolling through. He's gonna join our conversation here, talking about. There he is. What's up, Boyd?
Boyd, what's going on?
What's up, guys? How are you?
Not too bad.
It's been a long time coming, man. I can't remember the last time we got to talk hockey on a podcast together. But man, first of all,
it's been a minute.
Thank you for coming on Catfish Nights. How you doing, man? How's the summer going for you?
Man, it's good. It's good. Very busy. 2 kids in the summer is
oh yeah,
it's a lot of work. But
then
everything's good. Rolling along, almost back to school, which means we're almost back to hockey.
And then you got the Preds out here just keeping you extra busy, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, what a summer it's been, huh?
Yeah, so we're rolling through, we're rolling through the Preds and how they stack up against every Central Division team right now after the first wave of free agency, because you're going to start seeing all these predictions come out. We're in a lull of the offseason. A lot of the major moves are over with. And so everything's going to shift towards these season previews, these predictions. Where do we think teams are going to go? And so naturally we're talking about the Predators and where they stack up now in the Central Division. So where do you, Boyd, after free agency, first wave of free agency, I should say, where do you stick the Predators realistically right now? Do you think that they are a legit Central Division winner, or do you think they still have a long gap between themselves and the Stars and the Avalanche?
I mean, I think you have to put them up there. I mean, probably within at least the top 2 or top 3. I mean, with the players that they've added, hard to know what the long-term prospects of this roster setup look like. But I mean, it's pretty much unequivocally the most talented roster the Predators have ever put together. So, assuming Andrew Brunette can, find the way to make the pieces fit together, assume Saros is probably going to have some level of a bit of a bounce back season from even when he wasn't at his absolute best, he was still, above average. So assume all of that, a little bit better season from Evangelista, a little bit more growth from some other players, another year in Andrew Brunette's system. I mean, when that team got hot, they were as good as almost anybody in the league. So now you add players who can score outside of Philip Forsberg, and you have the recipe for a team who can be at the top of the division, pretty much without question.
Yeah. And so I want to touch on something that really is kind of getting lost in the shuffle, something that you just brought up, Boyd, and that is Andrew Brunette. So think about everything he accomplished in year one, leading this team behind the bench. And I think we're so lost in the players right now, and we're so excited about what this roster looks like on paper, that we're kind of forgetting that year two of Andrew Brunette's system you would think is going to be even better than what it was in year one. And I mean, he's one of the leading candidates, to be coach of the year again. And I mean, it's just everything seems to be coming into place, and we're kind of forgetting that the Predators also have one of the best rising head coaches in this league in Andrew Brunette.
Yeah, I mean, I think if nothing else, you would expect a little bit more consistency in the team's performance as just another year, both for the team and for him. I looked sort of at the end of the year at, their scoring and special teams by month. And it was just the offense, especially, was just peaks and valleys. They'd get super hot for a month, completely drop off for a month. Yep. The one thing that was really, really consistent was the defense. The goals against per game and the expected goals against were actually pretty flat throughout the season. So if you've got that piece already in place, and if you can just eliminate some of those valleys in the scoring, which between Stamkos, Marchessault, a better Evangelista, you would expect that to even out. Plus, and I think this is also going maybe a little under discussed, adding Brady Shea to the defense is another guy who can actually generate offense from the back end, which if you look at last year, outside of Yossi, it was an offensive graveyard.
Barry Trotz talked about that very, very thing on 102.5 The Game. Like, he literally mentioned that exact thing.
Yeah, I mean, another double-digit goal scorer on the back end just gives one more way that the team, can just flatten out some of those valleys. And, you get a team that goes from, 95 to 99 points to now you're looking at a team that's 105, 110 points. And now, just like that, you're at the top of the division, or at least, in that stratosphere, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. We got Boyd with us right now from Penalty Box Radio with Chadman and Max Greenberg as your host here, episode 238. So, Max, what else do we got to say about this right now?
I think, I agree with a lot of what, Boyd said as far as, where this Preds team, can go from here on out. Another question I want to ask you about the Preds, Boyd, is I know you mentioned a better Luke Evangelista coming. I definitely agree with that. He's one of the guys I really think has a bright future on this team. How much better also do you think a guy like Tommy Novak can be? And that's where I really think that this team, that could be a real X factor on this team, because as of right now, of course, we don't know what the lineup's going to look like. I'm sure they're going to kind of toy with it a good bit, but a lot of what I've seen from the lineup is, of course, keep Forsberg, O'Reilly, Nyquist. They have the chemistry. Then it looks like a lot of people are predicting, and I'm probably the same, with Stamkos left wing, Novak center, and Marchessault right wing on that second line. And I would expect, Novak has done a lot of really good. I feel like the playoff performance definitely put a damper in what a lot of people think about him. The physical game was exposed from his part, and that's definitely one thing you kind of need as a center to, match up against, because you're doing a lot of strong matchups in the league. just as far, but where do you think Tommy Novak, what do you expect from him? And, if so, how much does that potentially raise the ceiling of this team if he's really, really, really good?
Yeah. I mean, and if you think back, I mean, the line that he was playing on and that he was centering a lot of the time was Luke Evangelista on one side. Great. On the other side, a lot of the time it was Kiefer Sherwood. And, not a knock on Kiefer Sherwood. He's not a second line left winger in the NHL.
No.
And so a lot of that is there's an element of kind of, rising tides lift all boats. And, if you take that left wing spot and all of a sudden it's, Steven effing Stamkos, that's a very different experience, or, maybe it's some shuffling around. Maybe it's Nyquist and Marchessault is up on the top line with
that's what
Forsberg and O'Reilly. But even still, Nyquist, Novak, Evangelista is a huge step up from the talent that he was sort of overall playing with last season. So, is Tommy Novak going to be a 75 to 80 point center? Probably not. But if he's threatening 60 points, which means he's probably getting into that 35 to 40 assist range, probably handing it off to Stamkos quite a bit. But that also means he's probably playing a key role on the second power play. There's no reason to think he can't be a very, very solid middle six player. But there's definitely parts of that game he's going to have to improve. He's going to have to improve in the face-off dot. He's actually a pretty solid defensive player. So it's not the defensive game as much as just handling the physicality of night in, night out, playing a top six center role. But certainly the elements are there for him to kind of reclaim that scoring pace we saw at the end of the 2023 season.
All I'm saying is, preferably you would like Novak to slot in at that second line center role. But all I'm seeing from Lightning fans that are kind of bitter, and I understand why they're bitter, is good luck replicating what Kucherov did to feed Stamkos all those goal scoring opportunities. And the Preds have nothing like that to replicate that. And so they're all expecting Stamkos is going to drop off. Maybe he drops off a little bit, but I think that Andrew Brunette is going to definitely shuffle some things around, tinker some things around. But ideally speaking, on paper, you would love Tommy Novak to seize that second line center role, like Boyd's talking about, improve his game just a little bit, and see him, a 60-point season is very doable for Novak, playing with Marchessault and Stamkos as his two wings. But that is enormous pressure that this kid is facing if they put him in that situation. But I don't really know what other options they have at center. You really don't want Stamkos at center, right, Boyd? I mean, I think at this point in his career, he needs to be on the wing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think he can play it in spurts, matchups, there's probably certain teams, certain matchups, you can probably slot him in at center and he can still be effective. In terms of other options, I mean, you're looking at
Sissons.
I mean,
Sissons could play second line center.
You don't want him on second line.
You don't want to put him there. I mean, that's not where his best fit is. So if it's not Novak, you're probably elevating either a Cody Glass, assuming he's even on the roster come training camp.
That's what I'm saying.
Or it's a guy like Juuso Parssinen, who now physically he is 100% built for a top six center. Right. And he has the skill set to do it. It's, can he elevate to be able to do that night in, night out? It might be him in another year. I just don't know if it'll be this year.
And I very much don't think Barry Trotz would want that for Parssinen. He was talking about he was talking about both in his press conference and on 105 the game, basically saying how in his perfect vision, he has, the top six and the youth can come into the top nine. But ideally, you're not seeing any guys like Parssinen, Glass, like any of those guys taking on true like top six center roles. Novak's a little more proven, so maybe he can do it. But like Trotz, I very much don't envision Juuso Parssinen being a top six center on this roster at all.
Yeah. Well, and it's also easy to forget that Tommy Novak's 27?
That is true.
not a kid anymore. Like this is
right.
I mean, he doesn't have a lot of NHL years, but he's not a young guy. He's about as probably matured as he's going to get. It's rounding out some aspects of his game. And yeah, Max, you're absolutely right. I mean, Trotz was pretty significant that he wants those young, talented players, if possible, in Milwaukee, playing big minutes, playing big roles. I think we probably see Parssinen, some combination of Parssinen, Tomasino, and Glass on the NHL roster for the majority of the season. But after those three, especially among the forward core, outside of a cup of coffee, I don't think any of the other guys that were in Milwaukee spend significant time in Nashville.
I think that it's very fair to say that if this team is really going to live up to the hype that we're feeling right now after signing Stamkos and these other guys, it's really going to come down to figuring out that second line center role, who is going to take it, who is going to be ready to perform. And that's why I think it's very fair to say, and even Trotz hinted at this. He said, look, this team might go through another, trial period where the season opens up slow like last year. He wasn't predicting it, but he was saying, look, that could happen again. It's going to take some time for these guys, even Stamkos, to get comfortable and here. But that trial period, you're going to have to really figure out who are you ready to trust in that second line role, because you cannot screw this up with these two guys that you just paid a boatload of money to bring here. Trotz has made it very clear it's time to go win a Stanley Cup in the immediate future. We're not doing this whole 5-year plan thing. No, it's time to win now. So they better figure it out. But Tommy Novak's your number one option.
I mean, based on, what we've seen at the NHL level, I think he has to be, at least at the start. And you know what? If a guy like Glass, comes into camp super motivated, which he should be, and jumps up and takes that spot, and the guy was a number 6 overall pick. Like he doesn't lack for talent,
of course.
And if he jumps up and claims that spot, and Novak becomes a third line winger or a third line center, or even a second line winger, and bumps someone like Nyquist down to the third line, it's not that's actually not a bad problem to have.
It's not a bad problem.
Yeah, that'd be great.
If we're living in the land of what's most likely as we stand today on July 9th. It's probably going to be Tommy Novak in that second line center role, playing a big role in the second power play. And, you just hope that surrounding him with more talent really unlocks that, game in, game out offensive consistency that the underlying numbers have shown. And now it needs to show up a little more consistently on the score sheet.
Now, let me ask you both. Let me ask you both a question. So we talked about, Chad, you especially talked kind of about like the trial run that this team could have from time to time, especially in the beginning of the year where, team is not familiar with each other. I could really see that happening because when you look at this Preds team schedule to start the year, they have a tough few opening games. They have Dallas, of course, is the opening game. Edmonton, I believe, 3 times. Colorado twice. Boston once. Vancouver once. I look and I'm like, damn, that's a gauntlet. Like that, it could be tough. But if this Preds team can get through that stretch with like a really good record, I'm thinking, okay, like
they have a lot of Max. They have a lot of home games to open up the season.
They do, but like,
and so they're going to be under a microscope. They're going to be one of the teams that has the brightest microscope on them, because they did sign Stamkos and Marchessault, and they stole all the headlines. We talked about it in the last episode. They literally stole all the headlines of free agency day. Like all you saw was Nashville Predators this, Nashville Predators that. It was just, they were all over it. And on, not even counting the free agency signings, they re-signed Alexander Carrier, so that was all the headlines. Then they announced UC Saros' contract extension, so that was all over the headlines. It was all you could see was the Nashville Predators taking over hockey Twitter. I mean, the only other time that's ever happened was when this team went to the Stanley Cup final out of nowhere. So, I mean, it was definitely one of the craziest days in Nashville Predators franchise history, especially in today's age of social media where news just comes at your fingertips immediately. So that's all. So, Boyd, I want to bring you into the conversation that we were talking about before you jumped in live with us here. And that was just like stacking up the Predators against each Central Division team. Who still has the crown, in your opinion, for the Central Division going into the season? Is it still Dallas? Because Dallas had a very underwhelming free agency, but they still have a good core. Of course, we know the Colorado Avalanche still have their top-heavy, elite, talented core at the top as well. So we expect those two teams to be at the top. Who is your top team right now in the Central Division going into the season?
I mean, until proven otherwise, it's still Dallas.
Yes. Yep.
You know, their off season was a little bit underwhelming in some respects, but at the same time, if moving out a guy like Radek Faksa opened up more space, and more minutes for a guy like Logan Stankoven, who looked fantastic.
Absolutely.
Or a guy like Maverick Bork, who I think was the AHL MVP.
Such a great name.
It is a great name. And they've got some younger defensemen that have are only going to be expanding their roles. So, I mean, as of right now, I mean, until somebody proves differently, they're still the top of the division in my eyes.
Yeah.
Colorado is still up there, but man, they've got to find some goaltending, and their defense after Cale Makar and Devon Taves drops off pretty rapidly. So,
I mean, so does their offense after McKinnon and Rantanen.
Yeah, I mean, what really is going to be interesting, I think, is now that a guy like Jonathan Druin has had a full season there, and kind of recaptured some of his mojo, so to speak. Does he find his way back to the level of player that he can be? But they've got a big hole in their lineup right now with not Rantanen. Name is escaping me now.
Are you talking about Nichushkin?
Yes, yeah. I don't know why I couldn't.
And we were talking about that because granted, I told Chad I don't fully know the rule with it because the NHL is so weird with LTIR and like cap manipulation and stuff like that. But like, are those Nichushkin and Landeskog contracts really against him? Because those are absolute anchors for guys that are not playing.
Landeskog, I'm pretty sure could be LTIR'd, and I'm pretty sure he was last season. Nichushkin, because it's like stage 3 player assistance program. I don't know if they can LTIR him.
I don't know either.
So here's where we need to
have Cap Friendly and Puckpedia on speed dial.
Yeah, right. Definitely. So here's what I'm thinking, guys. When I'm thinking about Colorado and Dallas, they were already superior elite teams in this division. They didn't have to go out and do much of anything this offseason as long as they held on to their core, which they did, both of them. They're still going to be top teams. Whereas you take a team like the Predators, they had to go do some stuff to because the gap was so wide between Dallas. And I don't want to take any respect away from Winnipeg because obviously they finished second in the division. So no disrespect to Winnipeg. They were a huge surprise in the division. But just looking ahead, it's still Dallas and Colorado fighting for that top spot in the division. And now the Preds have joined the chat officially. So I think they've definitely shortened that gap. It's not nearly as wide. And I know Winnipeg fans will have something to say about that. Like, hey, we're still here too.
I was going to say, we haven't mentioned them at all.
And they are still there. I'm not, no disrespect, but it's still, for me, Colorado, Dallas, but that gap is a lot smaller now. And the Preds are definitely one of those teams that can sneak up there now, at least on paper.
Well, and it was too, Nashville, where they really lacked was that top of the lineup talent. And they went out and did the hardest thing to do, which is to go get top of the lineup talent and to do it all at once. It was really pretty masterful work by Barry Trotz when you think about it.
Yes.
And the fact that he maintained, in that 3 to 4 years from now window, almost this entire roster could get overturned to a legion of former first-round draft picks.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, there's so many prospects in the system right now.
So we're putting it on the screen, just what the Avalanche did. They didn't do hardly anything, but they didn't really lose anybody either of note. So they're kind of just keeping the status quo, which that works really well when you've got guys like Nathan McKinnon and Cal Makar and Mikko Rantanen on your squad. But as Boyd just said, that goaltending is very untrustworthy. I said the same thing opening tonight's episode with Georgiev. I mean, Max, I think in the past you've always had a hard time trusting Georgiev.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And it was enough to, this playoffs, I wasn't high on them at all. And that was a big reason why. Granted, they actually did win a series. I thought they would actually lose that series to Winnipeg. But no, I mean, their goaltending, absolutely. And granted, we've seen nowadays that elite goaltenders are not necessarily a requirement to go deep in the playoffs. But, you at least want your goaltending to be, decent. And there's very suspect.
These past Stanley Cup playoffs proved that. I mean, you look at, Sergei Bobrovsky was he's already proven in this league to be one of the better goalies of this past generation. But you look at the rest of the perceived top goalies in the NHL going into the playoffs, they all had really down playoff performances. They really did.
Had the worst goal saved against average or whatever, goal save above expected.
And let's not forget that the Predators losing in the first round had zero to do with UC Saros.
No, they couldn't score.
Against
a third string goaltender.
Unless you expect UC Saros to go out there and score a couple goals per game, then it's not on UC Saros that team lost in the first round. So, that's the whole adage goes, oh, you got to have this great goalie to win a Stanley Cup. Not necessarily. It's nice to have, but, Colorado, they're so top heavy that it's like they're going to be around again. But I think where the odds have the Predators right now is really fair. Third place, third best odds to win the Central. Would you agree with that, Boyd, in terms of what you're seeing out there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and it's, way too early lines, which are, usually one of two ways. Either they're based on past performance or they're based on overreaction to the future. So,
that's the thing. That's the thing. Are we overreacting to what the Predators did? Recency bias here is very much in effect with the Predators right now.
I will say though, and I was surprised. One thing I was surprised about the DraftKings odds was that Colorado was like a plus 260. What Dallas was a plus 230. Nashville's a plus 380. How is the gap that wide still? Is my question.
You got to prove it.
Exactly. Exactly what Boyd said.
If I was betting today, I'd still bet on Dallas and Colorado. But, and it's fascinating, by the end of November, that could completely change, or it could be the end of November, like last season, where Nashville was second to last in the league before they rattled off 18 games in a row.
And that's why they call them future bets. That's why it's completely impossible to predict. But at the same time, just preseason hype alone, the Predators are really getting a lot of hype right now. And it's and I want to ask you the same question, Boy. Me and Max answered this to open tonight's episode. Is this the most pressure and hype that this Predators team has ever faced in franchise history, outside of maybe coming out of their President's Trophy season?
It's one of those two for sure. That President's Trophy season was pretty special, but even then, it was still a very, very win by committee. Nothing comes easy, grind it out night after night. And this team, would anybody be shocked if they're running a power play at 24, 25% next season with Stamkos, Marchessault, O'Reilly, Forsberg, and Yossi?
Top five better be the bar.
So
there were times.
I think it's definitely the pressure is going to be intense. But I think that's part of why Barry Trotz goes and gets the players that he does is, Stamkos, O'Reilly, and Marchessault are not going to wilt under the pressure. And, on top of that, they're going to help lift up everybody else who's, maybe a little younger, a little less experienced, and, is still trying to kind of figure everything out. I mean, there is definitely something to the approach Barry Trotz has taken in creating this roster and the attitude and the culture around the roster, how that team can go about its business.
Absolutely. All right, we got a few more topics we want to get into with Boyd Farrish of Penalty Box Radio, feature writer. Before we get to that, here for episode 238 of Catfish on Ice, let's tell you about DraftKings, our sponsor with promo code THPN. Bet the action on the ice with DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, so let's tell you about some odds for tomorrow. We got Copa America going on right now between Colombia and Uruguay tomorrow. We got Colombia as plus 195 odds. In Uruguay, man,
something's up.
Yeah, something's going on with the microphone here. Hold on, let me fix that. All right. Can you guys hear me good here?
Yep.
All right, so we got Colombia and Uruguay going on tomorrow night in the Copa America. DraftKings Sportsbook has plus 195 odds for Colombia, plus 180 draw, or plus 185 for Uruguay. So those are some odds you can do for the Copa America with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the app now and use code THPN. New customers can get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting $5 on hockey. That's code THPN only on the DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. The crown is yours. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPENY or text HOPENY. That's 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/hockey for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. NHL and the NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. Copyright NHL 2023. All rights reserved. Let's move ahead here. A little bit of technical difficulties with the microphone.
Yeah, go ahead. So I know they're not in the Central, but I still want to ask because I think they're going to be the toughest mountain to climb out of all the teams in the West. Do we think this team is going to have a good chance to beat Edmonton? I don't know.
The struggle that they'll face with Edmonton is still the speed.
Yes. And they're deeper too now. They're even deeper.
Edmonton is deeper. I mean, a couple really under the radar signings. I mean, getting Jeff Skinner for $3 million. I mean, how does he not walk onto that roster and score another 35 or 40 goals?
And even our old friend Victor Arvidsson. That's another huge add. Defensively, I think they're still pretty top heavy. I don't think they have a ton outside of that Ekholm-Bouchard pair, but like offensively, they don't have a weakness, man.
Yeah, they're going to be tough, and they're going to be unbelievably motivated.
And they prove there's still a lot of. They say a lot of times that these teams are kind of more like speedy, flashy, up tempo. There may not be as much of those intangibles and like toughness, but like that team proved with how they almost came back against Florida. They have all that resolve in that locker room. Like they're not going to miss a ton or anything when it comes to that kind of side of the game where they really need to dig deep and have grit. Yeah,
I think with Edmonton, the question still remains. I mean, is Stuart Skinner capable of being the guy? Yeah. I mean, he's shown it in stretches, unquestionably shown it in stretches. but at the same time, when it's gone bad for him, it's gone real bad, real fast.
Yep. And he got benched for 2 games in the playoffs.
Yeah, which, I mean, credit to their coach, Chris Knobloch, for Pickard came in, won a game, lost the second one, could have very, very realistically, and probably nobody would have blamed him for playing Pickard one more game. And he went right back to Skinner and said, nope, I gave him his break. This is my guy. We're going to go. And Skinner made it happen. He's been really good in some really big moments. It's just a question of can he keep that level of play up, for, now really kind of unquestionably being the guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's shift ahead here. Let's talk about what Barry Trotz talked about with the whole next wave that he liked to use the terminology when it comes to, he said there's going to be opportunities for our next wave of prospects to work their way up the lineup. So let's reset the prospect pool here because there have been some trades that have happened. So, Boyd, tell us about what you think about the prospect pool now when it comes to with Erof Nasiev now gone. That unfortunately, he was a fan favorite among the prospects. So he was traded, but there's definitely some prospects to be excited about now as well. And I know you already kind of hinted at the fact that outside of a few guys here and there, we're not going to see a lot of guys from Milwaukee make it regularly on the NHL level, but kind of touch on what you think about the state of the Preds prospect pool now.
It's a really fascinating group of players. I mean, as we sort of talked about earlier, it's round picks are going to be within the next 2 to 3 years. Once Matthew Wood gets there, in 2 years, when Igor Surin gets there, I think after next year, Tanner Molendijk will be AHL eligible. It is an incredibly deep group of players with a lot of talent to where in the next 3 to 4 years, as O'Reilly rolls off, Nyquist rolls off, Sissons rolls off, you could see, Yossi will be coming towards the end of his contract. Lazan rolls off. There's an incredible number of roster opportunities that are going to come available to where outside of basically Saros, Forsberg, and Shea in 4 years, and which I guess and Marchessault would have one more year. In 4 years, almost the entire roster could turn over outside of 4 or 5 guys.
Absolutely.
So, that's either, and there's definitely going to be opportunities that come up within that span of time, or you've got an incredible amount of trading assets if you need to keep the window open a little bit longer.
Yeah, that's another huge aspect of it.
So, guys, let's talk about who are our top 5 prospects in the prospect pool for the Predators now. And I want to start with Boyd first, then we'll go to you, Max, then I'll give mine. But who are your top 5 most NHL ready prospects? And let's preface this by saying what makes them a prospect. So are we going to still call like Parsonen and Tomasino prospects? No. So I'm talking about guys that need to prove themselves, have yet to prove themselves on the NHL level yet. Who do you think is that next crop of guys who maybe haven't gotten a taste of the NHL yet, but they're your top 5 prospects right now for the Predators for the future, for those 4 years down the road that you're talking about, Boyd?
Yeah. I mean, number 1 right now still probably has to be Askarov. I mean, he's probably proven the most, and is at a premium position. Number 2, try not to overreact to recency bias and put Zach LaRue there, but boy, it's tough right now.
Yeah, it really is.
I'd probably still go Joachim Kemmel. Just such an unbelievable skill set. Number 3, I'll probably put Tanner Molendyk, just because I think his ceiling is probably a little bit higher than someone like Ryan Ufko, who, don't get me wrong, has a really high ceiling, but he's also a little bit older. There's a little more runway for Molendyk to grow. Number 4, I think I'll put probably Zach LaRue there, just because of the growth that he showed this year was really incredible. And then number 5, I'm going to put Fedor Svechkov.
I was waiting for you to say him.
I thought he had an unbelievable season in Milwaukee. Like, if you looked at him from training camp in Nashville to even the turn of the calendar year in January, he was a different player. And he does so many good things on the ice. And he plays center, and he's built to play center, and, plays both ends of the ice. There's just so much to like there. And then, my probably right after that top 5 is probably Matthew Wood and Igor Surin, who both look to be really tremendous prospects. In my mind, I need to see a little bit more. And, obviously Surin is 17. So, let's wait on that one a little bit, even though I think he's it's very, very potentially a special player, but let's give him a little bit of room to grow.
And
and then
a lot of the scouts,
I liked what I saw from Matthew Wood.
I was just going to touch on Igor Surin a little bit here, real quick. So a lot of the scouts are saying that it could end up being a major steal for the Predators, but it's like a very wide range of he's a very wide range of possibilities with this prospect when it comes to Surin. Like, he's got a high upside, but he's also got some things he's got to work on. So getting him at number 22 could end up being one of the steals of the first round. Because some people had him second round talent, late or early second round talent. So some might argue that the Predators maybe overreached to take him at number 22. But then there's others out there who I've saw that said, no, like, this guy has a high ceiling. But I think one thing we know about Surin is he's going to fit this style of team perfectly. Absolutely. With how he plays. And he's very raw, obviously. But in that 4-year window that you're talking about, Boyd, why not? Why not?
Yeah. I mean, I'm fascinated to see what Igor Surin actually becomes, because just watching him in the prospect showcase this past weekend, I mean, like, he just skates through people trying to stick check him, people trying to get the puck off him, and he just skates right through them, which is a pretty rare skill. So I'm fascinated to see how the next couple of years go for him. And, hopefully, I think he's got 2 years left on his contract in Russia. Hopefully after those 2 years, at 19 years old, he's able to make his way over to North America and, join Milwaukee and start his path.
All right, Max, you want to give us your, do you kind of agree with Boyd, or what would be your
I would mostly agree, although I might have a difference here and there. Yaroslav Askarov is one, obviously, in terms of just the pure prospect. He's going to be within that top 2, that probably even top 1. It's kind of hard to put him there for me, because it's just hard for me to think he's really going to be on this team for the long term with signing UC Saros. But I'm going to kind of leave him kind of out of it as far as that a little bit, but I'm also going to say up to 5 other ones. I'm not gonna rank them like quite that much, because I don't watch Milwaukee quite as closely, but I'm gonna say my top 5. I would say definitely one of them is Joachim Kemmel. We've known about his talent, and with his shot and upside, there's really not a lot not to like there. I would say also they were talking about Fedor Svechkov, the year he had, and he seems like a really, really solid two-way center. You can't not like that. Zachary Leroux I was also putting up there as well. One of the things that I saw that really caught my eye was earlier in one of the press conferences, Barry Trotz, I can't remember if it was like the one at the very end of the year or another one, but he basically said, we're not penciling in Zachary Leroux, but we're going to leave him some room to at least have a chance to crack this roster. When I saw that, I'm thinking, okay, this is a challenge from Barry Trotz saying, buddy, we are high on you, but you really got to prove your stuff. So I could see him absolutely coming into training camp with the eye of the tiger, just that mentality, the blue collar mentality, just to absolutely this kind of weird thing, but they start kind of killing people just to do everything he can to get that spot, take no prisoners. I think that he's going to come into training camp with so much fire, and I can't wait to see what happens from him. I would say also Matthew Wood and Tanner Molendyk. Don't know a ton about them, but they're obviously our first round prospects from last year, and they have a lot of potential. The one guy I really want to talk about, though, I know he's only been on the team in the system for 2 weeks now, but let's talk about Andrew Gibson, the guy Barry Trotz just acquired. I mean, and he is not proven, but he has such a rare skill set. His size, he can skate. Like, guys who are that big who can skate like that alone do not grow on trees, but he can also shoot the puck, defensively responsible. He can get physical. He has great offensive instincts. And we've seen that Barry Trotz is really high on him. That's a guy I cannot wait to see. That, especially because I've talked about pretty much as anyone how the Preds' right side of the defense needs a lot of help. And Andrew Gibson is absolutely going to be a key there. I cannot wait to see him develop over the years.
And I think Trotz brought up Andrew Gibson by name as a type of guy who could work his way into the lineup at some point.
Yeah. Probably not this year. He's going to need at least a year or two, but he's got a lot. He's a bright future ahead of him.
So Max and Boyd, I got to ask you guys, no one has brought up Mark Del Gaizo yet. Are we just saying he's no longer a prospect, even though he's...
I had him on my list, but with a question mark next to it, because I just don't see how he fits into this team. Again, left side of the defense is so log jammed, especially signing Brady Shea. That's another hurdle he's going to overcome. I just don't see how he gets into this lineup. Really,
he played so great, though, man. He really did. I mean, he really stepped up to the plate when they called upon him this past season.
But
I mean, from my perspective, when I look at prospects, I'm looking at ceiling. Like, what could they become? If they tap all their talent and they max out, what could they become? And Mark Del Gaizo is a really, really solid defenseman. He will end up playing NHL minutes regularly, in Nashville or somewhere else, however that plays out. Is he going to ascend to being a top 4, top 2 defenseman? Probably not. But that's not a knock on him at all. Just, what is his ceiling compared to a guy like Tanner Molendyk, a guy like Ryan Ufko, some of these guys where you watch them play and you can see where, they can project out to that top level. No, I've liked Mark Del Gaizo's game for years, and I still hope he gets a chance in Nashville. But yeah, Max, I agree. I mean, you go down the left side of that defense, and he's
so many dudes.
Number 5, number 6, just on the left side.
Is that?
Yeah, I mean that's tough. Yeah. So I think training camp this year. I mean, as Nashville always sets it up every year as being highly competitive, but for that 13th forward, 7th defenseman, those kind of spots in the realm of the roster, I think are going to be really fascinating to see. I think the main 12 forward, 6 defensemen are probably going to be relatively set by the end of camp, but those kind of next man up spots, I think are going to be really fascinating to see how they play out.
Now, Boyd, I want to pick your brain a little on something. So I actually haven't seen you fully post about this on Twitter or your articles. But anyway, you also have a Skarov. Obviously, the UC Saros extension means that he's not going to be starting in Nashville anytime soon. Are you thinking that he's going to are you thinking that you are on board training him? And are you me and probably Chad thinking that it's a matter of when and not if?
Probably. I was mostly curious to see what the trade protection for Saros was going to end up being.
Right.
And now, granted, trade protection only lasts as far as the player's unwillingness to waive it.
Right.
But, when Trotz first talked about the contract, he made mention that it wasn't he had earned the trade protection, but part of their negotiation was not having it for the full term. So I thought, if they got him down to 4 years of no move and then maybe to modified no trade after that, then you hold to that 4-year window and okay, Askarov is the guy in Milwaukee for another year, maybe 2. And then he's the backup, and which to be a backup in the NHL, he'd still only be 23 years old. Like, it's easy to forget. Ascarov's 21.
Yeah.
He is ridiculously young.
Yep.
Especially for
just
goalies.
turned 22. Just turned 22.
Just turned 22. Still ridiculously young for goalies.
Yes.
And, so if it was maybe a 4-year trade protection, then I would say, okay, maybe Askarov rides that out, spends a couple years as the backup, then maybe year 5, year 6 of that contract for Saros, based on where the team is, him and Barry Trotz come to an agreement and Saros gets moved.
And you also,
but considering it's a no move, I believe for 6 years,
it is.
Then, man,
and it doesn't even start till next. Like this coming year is still the last year on his current contract. This contract doesn't even start till next year. So he's really got 9 years coming.
So guys, Askarov's got 1 year left on his ELC. So I'm thinking 2025 trade deadline is when you most likely would. I think at this point you would want to hold on to Askarov going into the season. You let him cook in Milwaukee again. You let him be one of the best AHL goaltenders in the league. You let him continue to build his resume and build his trade value down there, and then you make a decision at the 2025 trade deadline. I don't think it serves you well right now unless it's just a tremendous trade offer that some team offers you. I don't think there's any reason to rush into trading Askarov right now. You don't have to rush into this.
No, I mean, Barry Trotz has set a high price and he should absolutely stick to it. There's no reason to move him right now.
He's in a power position. He is
agent, so
he is in a power position. He's in a power position. Real quick, guys. Let me give you my top 5 real quick. So I actually don't have Askarov at number 1 for me anymore. I call it recency bias all you want, but I'm putting Zachary Leroux up there. I think it's a matter of when, not if, he's in the lineup. Does he stay in the lineup long term in 2024-25? Maybe not, but I definitely think he's going to get his first taste of NHL action at some point. And I just think he's built for the NHL. Maybe not top 6, but he's built to be a tone setter guy who can also give you offense. And he's going to fit the Predator system perfectly in the way this team plays eventually. And I just think he's the most NHL ready guy at this point. I really do, in the Preds prospect pool. And he had to get some of those disciplinary things under control. He had to get his emotions under control. He had to learn that.
And
he still had a few of those moments this year.
I mean, did you see his penalty minutes? They're insane. You look at his penalty minutes; it looks like something off of. It looks like something.
What were they exactly?
Oh, I'd have to look it up, man. It's something out of an NHL video game. How many penalty minutes he had, but yeah, I've got him number 1. I think he's going to start honing some of that back a little bit. But his biggest weakness is also his biggest strength. I've always said that about Leroux. So you got to really, really tread lightly when it comes to coaching him on that aspect of his game. But I'll put Askarov number 2. As long as we have him, he's got to be number 2. But like Max just said, I don't see his path forward to make an impact on this franchise. It's not that he's the best prospect we have, bar none. But what's his path forward to make an impact on the NHL level for the Predators anymore? He doesn't have one. I mean, Trotz did speak of there's going to be a training camp battle between Wedgwood and Askarov. How much stock do you take into that, Boyd? Do you think that's just is that just Trotz just throwing it out there because he's got to say it, or do you actually see some truth to that?
There's an element of truth. I mean, do I think Askarov beats out Wedgwood, who was one of the best backups in the league last year? I mean, again, as of today, would I say that's likely? No. But the level of talent that Askarov has, is it possible? Absolutely. And
keep going.
And I don't think Trotz is afraid to pull the trigger and either send Wedgwood to Milwaukee or trade him.
Time out, guys. How has Kevin Lankinen still not gotten a contract? Is that baffling?
That's staggering.
Does that baffle you guys as much as me? I don't get.
How did Jack Campbell get bought out and get another contract before Kevin Lankinen did?
Yeah, that's insane.
I mean, we're talking about Lankinen mirrored Saros's numbers last year in goals against and save percentage. I mean, and beat out Saros in goals saved above expected. And somehow this guy, and I get why the Predators didn't retain him, is because he was too expensive, and I get it, but he earned it. He earned a starter's role somewhere. How does this guy not have a contract? It's crazy. He's 29 years old. He performed as one of the better backups in the league behind Saros for 2 years. I don't get it. I don't know how this guy
or something. I don't know.
I don't know how this guy doesn't have a contract.
Well,
Sorry.
I think he's falling under the same as like some of the guys who have played in Anaheim recently. Like, he was the starting goalie for Chicago when they were garbage.
Yeah.
Like, they were bad.
And still are.
When he and yeah. And so I think, I'm not shocked that as a result of that, he had to take a step back, be a backup for a couple of years. But yeah, I mean, he's still kind of in his prime years. Goalies marinate till later. But especially the matchups the Predators gave him, which were almost always on the road.
Yes, good point.
Almost always against ridiculously difficult competition. And oftentimes it was the back end of a back-to-back.
Okay, John. I comment.
A little Titans jab there.
Wait, it's almost training camp, so we're going to start doing Titans talk again soon.
We will. We will be doing Titans talk again.
By the way, while we're on a pause on that, I did go look it up. Zach LaRue had 197 penalty minutes last season.
Yeah, I somehow expect to be over 200, so I'm not.
130 more than the next highest person.
Okay, that's crazy.
I remember it being something crazy like that. I just didn't know the exact number. Yeah, he's going to definitely have to hone in some of that. All right, so let me finish my list real quick. So I still got ZLH at number 1 for me. I got Askarov number 2. Number 3 is really difficult for me, but I'm going to go ahead and go with Joakim Kimmel as well because of his elite shot that he has. And I think it's a very realistic 2 to 3 year window before we see Kimmel and he'll, another prospect that doesn't have to be rushed into the fold anytime soon. I'm right on board with Boyd when he says that a lot of these guys we are not going to see on the NHL level this year because there's no reason to. You don't go out and sign big time players like Stamkos because you plan on calling all these guys up right away. Right. Like it's so, but he's up there. I would put Svechkov number 4. Really was pleased with his offensive development because the knock on Svechkov coming out of the draft was, he's a safe, conservative, defensive style forward. He'll do the right things for you, but his offensive ceiling is extremely low. I remember seeing a lot of scouting reports on Svechkov about that, but his offensive game was very impressive in his first year with Milwaukee. So He's got
a lot of skill.
He's got a lot of skill.
Got some great hands.
And I think it's going to serve him very well that he's got a two-way game too. He is not a one-trick pony. He's building he's becoming a well-rounded player before our eyes in Milwaukee. So, and number 5 is such a toss-up for me. I mean, it's a crapshoot. You could pick so many different guys. There's a lot of good guys out there. You got to go defenseman. I like that Max brought up Gibson. Who was acquired, not someone who's going to come in right away and make an impact. I think Tanner Mollendijk, as high of a ceiling as he has, is a little bit further down the road. So I might just throw Gibson in there at number 5 just because he's got the shorter path to the NHL. But Molendyke, I mean, I was seeing the video shared by Emma Lingen of the Hockey Writers, and she was talking about his smooth skating and sharing videos and clips in development camp of Tanner Molendyke and how this guy skates, how naturally gifted he is, and he could be like a Roman Josi prototype, if you will. So, I mean, got to be excited about that.
And I will tell you, I mean, from watching that prospect showcase, Tanner Molendyke was hitting anything that moved. He was out there ready to prove that he wants to play big boy hockey. Like he was stapling guys into the boards in the corners. You know, he was playing with a level of intensity that you don't often see in those types of showcase games. So he's out there with something to prove, which, you know, what better thing to have for a prospect than a chip on their shoulder and ready to prove something. So he looked great from that standpoint.
All right, let's get our last segment in here of episode 238 of Catfish and Ice with Boyd Farrish of Penalty Box Radio, feature writer for them. Really excited to have him back on the podcast. Been a long time coming. We're going to try not to go so long between episodes when he joins again. But let's round it out. We all have busy lives, so I get it. Let's get into the final segment, and that is just some trade banter here. Even though the Predators are probably done, but I mean, you would like to see them free up some cap space, some cap flexibility, if you will. There's some guys on this team right now who don't really have open spots on this roster anymore. The first player I think about, guys, is Dante Fabro. So I want to go around the room, but I want to go to Boyd first, the guest here. What do you see? I mean, let me just open with this. You know, everyone thinks that like Dante Fabro has all these haters and people don't like him, and Dante Fabro is an outstanding player for what he does. I want to see Dante Fabro traded right now, not because he's a bad player, but because I think he could serve another team much, much better and more effectively than where he's at right now. I don't want to see Dante Fabro healthy scratched for half of the season if he's lucky. Yeah. He is way too talented of a player to be healthy scratched and be sitting on the bench. So, Boyd, what do you think first about Dante Fabro? Do you think he has any trade value? Do you think that's something the Preds could pull the trigger on at some point in the next, up until the 2025 trade deadline?
Well, I mean, when it comes down to it, the Predators are going to have to make a move somewhere. I mean, they're over the cap already, so they're going to have to move somebody. And, you know, when you look at the current makeup of the roster and the fact that they just gave Carrier an extension, to many people's chagrin, they're not trading Luke Shen.
Right.
And, you know, there's just, they're at a place, they're at a place where there just may not be a spot for Dante Fabro. Right. And honestly, when you look back and you recall, you know, he got his contract extension at the trade deadline. And what that really was at that point, because, you know, they kicked around the idea of trading Carrier, they didn't trade him. They eventually re-signed Fabro, was he was basically Carrier protection. If Alex Carrier walked and went to market and went somewhere else, they had a similarly styled player in Dante Fabro of about the same age range, about the same cost. You know, obviously, you know, there are some things that Dante Fabro does really, really well on the ice. He defends the blue line and blue line entries about as well as anyone. He does so well at that, of breaking up people trying to get through the blue line. And, you know, does a lot of things well. He skates well enough. He moves the puck well. You know, he has just this unbelievable ability that when he makes a mistake, it ends up in the net. And I don't know what black cat he saw or ladder he walked under or whatever it was, but you know, every mistake that he makes in the defensive zone immediately ends up in the back of the net. But all that to say, though, he is a quality, still young, very affordable right-handed defenseman. He plays a premium position. And for a team that is looking to, either, maybe take a step forward or stabilize their defensive core a bit, whether that's, someone like Anaheim, who's trying to sort of work their way back towards, or someone like Columbus, who really needs to like do anything.
That would be a team like that would be a great landing spot for him. A rebuilding team, a team where there's very little pressure, but he can come in and kind of prove himself. 26 years old now. It feels like we forget how young Dante Fabro still kind of is. I mean, because he got thrown into the mix so fast for Nashville at a really early age. And I mean, he just hasn't really ever been able to really stake his claim as a long-term player. Nashville's never invested in him long-term. They keep feeding him these one-year deals and stuff to prove it. I just think he needs to find greener pastures. He needs to land somewhere in an organization that's going to let him really go out there. And there's just no room for him here anymore. Now, I don't know what kind of trade value he's really going to get. Max, do you think, what do you think? Do you think he could get, I mean, at this point, you're just looking to unload him. I don't think you're trying to get anything great out of it.
Considering Ryan McDonough, it's kind of a different situation. Considering Ryan McDonough only got a second round, I think the value was a third at best.
I think the value in it is just freeing up cap space at that point. I think that's the value of trading Dante Fabro is you're freeing up cap space. I don't even think
you wouldn't get but like a mid-round pick.
I don't think you're worried about what you get in return. If you get a mid-round draft pick, you take it and you run, and you're really just freeing up that. I know it's not a lot of cap space, but it's $2.5 million. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I think you can reasonably expect to get a mid-round pick, maybe a couple of mid-round picks if you kind of spread them out a bit, or a B level to a B plus level prospect. I think that's a reasonable trade return for Fabro. When I looked at kind of the really big idea trade market earlier this offseason, I was often stapling Fabro when I was considering like a Saros trade for someone. You have this major asset in Saros, but these teams also need someone like Fabro and has value to them. So I think there's value out there for him. I think that's probably one of the easier moves for Trotz to make because, what teams don't need a 26-year-old right-handed defenseman who's not a traffic cone. So,
and, I agree. And, really, when you look over this Preds roster right now, it's a pretty short list when you think about who you're trying to trade right now. I think Trotz, for the most part, is very happy with the team he has. He went out and he built it. He added the missing pieces he thought he needed to go out and do with Stamkos and such. And now you're thinking, there's not a whole lot of guys you're wanting to trade right now. You're in win now mode, which means you're not trying to trade a lot of guys until we see what happens. And then, Max, I know you were all in the Gus Nyquist trade.
Well, not quite as much anymore.
Not anymore. No, not anymore.
Well, the thing with Nyquist, I wouldn't put it quite past them. The thing is, the difference with this is if you're trading Nyquist this time around, it's because you're getting another player. You're not trading Nyquist for like picks of prospects. You would be trading.
Guys, guys, let's go ahead and just throw Luke Shen out there and make him available, and just watch everyone just rush to sign him. Teams are going to be beating down the door to sign Luke Shen. We got to put him on the trade market, guys. Luke Shen, he is available. Someone come take him.
There's a few more options realistically.
But I do like Luke Shen, actually. I'm just making jokes here. Luke Shen, I thought he grew on me as the year went on, guys. He was the butt of every joke on Preds Twitter. And I think the guy really grew on me as the season went on. He served his role. He played his role.
And if you looked at his underlying numbers in like February, March, April versus November, December, January, it was night and day.
You can even see by the eye test, like I wouldn't say he was totally mistake free, but like the bad lapses were happening way less as the year went on.
But guys, Cody Glass is a guy though that we should mention.
That's what I was going to say next. And the part of the problem with Cody Glass is like, I just don't see where he fits into this roster anymore. Like we know that Andrew Brunette probably is not going to want to give him big minutes, and the bottom of the roster at the center position is so log jammed. I just don't see a spot for him. He makes $2.5 million. That's a spot right there. I think if you're Barry Trotz, you got to look to unload.
Do you think there's actually, before we go to you real quick, Boyd, do you think that, I want Boyd for you to answer this as well, what kind of trade interest do you think is out there for a guy like Cody Glass? Do you think there's a team out there who's interested in giving Cody Glass another a new home again, where he has to prove himself again? He already had to do that leaving Vegas and coming to Nashville, and we thought it was going to work out, and I'm not saying it can't work out anymore, but as Max is saying, where do you put him at this point?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I mean, if I would love to see Cody come into training camp and just be the best version of what he can be and force the Predators' hand to do something.
He's a guy you root for.
Great guy. In absence of that, yeah, I kind of agree. He's probably been a little bit squeezed out, by, and some of it is just he was hurt, and that makes it tough.
Twice. Didn't he have 2 separate injury stints?
Yeah. And they were like close to each other. So right when he got back to the lineup, he gets pulled again. It's just like, man.
Yeah, he had a rough season. I mean,
like the emergence of Mark Jankowski. Who could have predicted that Mark Jankowski would come into the lineup and make, the journeyman of Mark Jankowski comes in and just kind of steals the limelight a little bit. I mean, I'm not saying he was like, it's nowhere near as highlight reel as what Cody Glass can be, but Jankowski comes in as kind of like a journeyman veteran and just kind of holds steady in that starting lineup. No one saw that coming. No one expected Jankowski to be anything more than a fringe plug and play type of guy that you start maybe when a guy is banged up and needs some rest, and then you pull him right back out of the starting lineup as soon as that guy's ready to go. But Jankowski's stuck around in the lineup, and I enjoyed watching Jankowski play all year. So I think Jankowski was one of those players that was kind of a roadblock for Cody Glass to ever get any traction.
Yeah.
So, by the way, my favorite bit of like Mark Jankowski trivia, the Predators, when they traded for Paul Gaustad, they sent a first-round pick to Buffalo that was eventually sent to Calgary, that was used to draft Mark Jankowski. In that same trade, the Predators, alongside Paul Gaustad, received a 4th-round pick.
I know.
You know what that 4th-round pick became?
Is it Spencer Stastny?
UC Saros.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so that Paul Gaustad trade from like 2013 or whatever that was, just reaped ridiculous benefits.
Crazy. Good stuff.
Now, I will kind of say I actually had another guy on this trade list who I was considering, and it is not going to be popular. It's going to probably
who could this be?
And I can imagine a reaction from both of you, but
Phil Forsberg.
Right. In all seriousness, Colton Sissons, I would not rule out.
I mean, yeah, it could happen, but I don't see a point.
I don't think it's a good chance, but here's my thought process behind it. He's making almost $3 million. He's at center. It's a really
we know that has been a bargain for how many years, Max?
Well, Chad, let me say this. You also months ago said you would not even discuss me when I brought Brian McDonough to be traded, and look what happened.
I didn't want to discuss the Ryan McDonough trade, not because I thought you were wrong, but because I had a loyalty to Ryan McDonough, and I didn't want to see it happen.
And you have a loyalty to Colton Sissons as well.
And now I have way more loyalty to Colton Sissons. Now, if you trade him, there's always a price for every player when it comes to trading players. So if it's
actually somewhat of return.
It could. Depends on the team. I think Colton Sissons is way too important to your bottom 6 and your playoff. And I think of Colton Sissons as a type of player that just makes you a better playoff team once you get into a 7-game series and you have to go through that long haul. I want Colton Sissons on my side. He's been there from the beginning. He does so many things well. It better be a damn good offer in the trade market for me to give up Colton
Just
Sissons.
saying with his cap hit, and again, that you are log jammed at center.
It is fair to bring him up, but Colton Sissons is
Colton Sissons is happened. Crazy.
But yeah, well, no, it's definitely not crazy. But Colton Sissons has also proven that he can play. He can switch over and play wing if he has to.
Yeah,
and he does too much in the faceoff circle. He does too many things on the penalty kill and other areas. You
really would lose a lot of the penalty kill.
It would be
one where I'm like, okay, you better.
It'd be a really big blow to the bottom six, which is so important. And the Preds had a really good bottom six last year. I really don't want to mess with that too much. And I don't see Colton Sissons getting anything that's too irresistible on the trade market anyway. So unless something just comes out of nowhere and some team is just absolutely in love with Colton Sissons, we got to have him. Barry Trotz, we got to have him. We'll overpay to have Colton Sissons. Then I'm not on board with it.
I mean,
Max.
if someone could overpay for Tanner Jeannot, you can overpay for Colton Sissons.
I mean, yeah. I don't know, Boyd. What do you think, man? Am I overreacting? Do I love Colton Sissons too much? Am I just like it? Do I need to get my emotions out of it? And
how can you not love hat trick Colton Sissons?
I know but I just can't think.
Yeah, I mean, in the world of when you look at it, I mean, when it comes to if we're taking Barry Trotz at his word, which based on recent experience, we probably should, because he tends to go and do what he says he's going to do. He has said, he is looking at moving an asset or two to clear cap space. And when you look at the Predators roster, I mean, there's basically 4 people that have relevant cap hits that would fall somewhere in the, reasonable to be traded. The reason why I wouldn't necessarily include Sissons in that, at least right now, is it's a team that right now has Stanley Cup aspirations, that we would consider to be in the world of realistic. Obviously everybody has Stanley Cup aspirations, but with the roster that's been compiled, that's where they're at. And a player like Colton Sissons is, you look down the list of like recent Stanley Cup champions and the depth guys that have played significant roles at some point in that playoff run to help them get there and get over the hump. And a guy like Colton Sissons fits that mold.
Sissons is another guy that feels older than what he is. Like, he's only 30 years old. And like, for some reason, like Colton Sissons feels like he's 35 at this point. Like, he's been around for so long and he's only 30.
He was the captain of the Admirals at age 20.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy.
To Max's defense, I do think it's fair. You have to bring up Colton Sissons because his cap hit is almost $3 million. And as Boyd just said, when you're talking about freeing up cap space, you do have to bring up Colton Sissons. But I also think that right now, I think that it's hard for the Predators to even be talked about as a team that wants to trade right now, because they've kind of got their team now. They just went and so it's like, really, it's for me, it starts and ends with Dante Fabro, Cody Glass, and Yaroslav Askarov. Those 3. I have a hard time thinking any of the other guys get realistically traded.
One thing I also want to say, we were talking earlier about Yaroslav Askarov and potentially that you guys were talking about maybe the so-called battle between him and Scott Wedgwood, and you guys are saying that you think there might be some truth to it. I'm going to say I really don't, because I was listening to that thing that Trotz had on 102.5 The Game, and he's talking about how, these young prospects, especially goaltending, it's such a position where, and of course he also mentioned Mitch Korn too, who is one of the best in the business, and he leans on him. And what we basically said was that with these younger goaltenders, it's a position where you're going to want to be playing the whole time. Like, if he's going to be the backup in Nashville to UC Saros, who's playing 62 plus games a year, he's playing and then Askarov's playing 20 games max. Trotz said, like, that's not going to be good for him. But if he's going to be in Milwaukee where he's a starter, he's playing all the time, getting reps, That's what's going to be beneficial. So I really don't see
it would just be
how
and it would be
in Nashville.
Yeah,
be,
I think it's a case of he would have to like leave no doubt,
and it would be
he would have to walk in camp and just be unquestionably better than Wedgwood.
Right.
So do I think that's likely?
No, it's not.
Is it
how weird would that
be? Yeah.
How weird would that be to have a Coley you just went out and signed? Yeah, only $1.5 million, but I mean, you just went out and signed him in free agency, and he's like, what do you do with Wedgwood at that point? He's
you
like,
probably put him on waivers.
I mean, that would just be like a total waste of money and would not make sense to me at all.
Well, I mean, here's the thing that I will say though. I mean, in the modern NHL, you've got to have 3 goalies.
So before they went out and got Wedgwood in free agency, my best case scenario in this whole situation was maybe Askarov, even with a newly signed contract extension with Saros. This was before Saros got his extension. I was thinking, okay, Saros gets his extension. You still make Askarov the backup for the short term, and he just absolutely shows out as backup for Saros, and then you deal him at the trade deadline, and you get a great return because Askarov proves he could be a starter somewhere. Because Askarov still doesn't have that NHL proven track record yet. He started 2 games in his career. That's it. And he looked good. He showed flash. His first start was crazy. I remember that game like it was yesterday against Montreal, where he was out. He was out there skating like a Ford. Do you remember that, Boyd?
I remember.
Yeah.
I mean, the dude was out there like fearless, just like, and then his second second start, he looked way more in check and really ready to go. Looked locked in.
Washington.
Oh yeah, but you still need more. You still need more.
Yeah.
And so my thought process was, let's get him as a backup and let's let him boost that trade value. But he can still boost that trade value being the full-time starter for Milwaukee as well, which is what you're hoping he does. But guys, it's been a lot of fun. We could go on for 2 more hours probably. We really could. But we are going to go ahead and put episode 238 to rest because I can actually see my 6-month-old puppy tearing up everything in my living room right now. She is basically telling me it's time to end the episode. So that's what we're going to do right now, guys. But it's been a lot of fun.
Always listen to the dog.
You got to listen to the dog. I think she's done with Preds talk. She's like, Dad, it's the middle of July. Why are we having a 2-hour episode on hockey right now? But guys, it's been a lot of fun. Boyd Farrish of Penalty Box Radio has been our outstanding guest of episode 238, the special edition of Catfish on Ice. Really looking at the roadmap ahead for the Preds. Is the hype real? We looked at the Central Division and how they stacked it up. We looked at the prospect pool now after the first wave free agency, and we looked at some guys that might be traded by the Preds now. It's been a lot of fun. We hope you enjoy the episode. Please hit subscribe below if you're watching on YouTube and hit the like button. And give all of us a follow on X, Boyd, Max Greenberg, Boyd Farrish, and myself, Chad Minton. We appreciate you so much. Until then, everyone have a great summer. Stay cool out there. We'll see you soon.
See you guys.